Welcome back to Operator Syndrome. This is episode 98. So, on our road to 100 episodes. So, just keep that in mind that we're coming up on the end here. So, if you got any questions or comments, get them in now. We'll see if we can rec. At the very least, we can respond. Emails operator syndrome podcast at gmail.com. Today, we're talking a very interesting topic, actually, because the idea itself weaves a couple, two very interesting topics in and of themselves, and weaves them together. And this is a book that Steve is working on, and I think it's fascinating. So we're going to talk about the premise today. Will let me ask some stupid questions, but other than that, Steve, how would you like to talk about? Maybe we start with how you came up with this idea.
Hmm. Well, in a previous episode, we talked about how, I don't know what number it was, how Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu came into my life, and then it's bled into the teams, but it's also bled into a lot of military combatives from then on. It was like a revolution in martial arts, and it remains that way. And but I had the good fortune of being trained by arguably one of the, if not the best, jujitsu masters of all time. I mean, Hixon Gracie. His name, by the way, his name is spelled Rickson. In Portuguese, R's are pronounced with H's. So it's Hixon, but it looks like Rickson, in the English phonetic alphabet.
Mhm.
But anyway, he's a phenomenal dude. I mean, there's already a second book coming out on him, about him. There's one out just devoted to him, and then the one I'm working on about him. Basically, he's the theme that runs through the book, and I think he's such an incredible person that more books could be written about him. I mean, he's one of those just 1 in 10 million kind of people. Um, and but so I, learning from him really has transformed me in many ways through the years. I still pinch myself like I was, I'll go to places. I still train jujitsu. I'm still training now, not as intensely as I once did, but I still like to keep sharp on some of it. And people will, like, I just had a black belt walk up to me a couple weeks ago, and he's like, "Man, if you ever could introduce me to Hixon, man, I'd be in your total debt." I'm like, anytime, bro. Hixon would, he would totally. But he's like a legend now. It's like myth, how great he was, and I got to see a lot of this back in the day. So, but what really struck me is not just, it doesn't have to do, well, it has something to do with his ability to fight, his ability to like destroy every, like, guys that are, and here's the thing that's really hard to wrap your head around. Like, I'm on a certain level of jujitsu, but I had to train for years to get to a certain level to where I could even begin to start appreciating how good he was.
Mm.
And then, like, people that are higher than me, they understand how good he is on a whole nother level than I do. So he's just on a different plane of consciousness. I mean,
Mhm.
so there's a lot to it. There's a lot to him as a person. And what a great fighter he is. But what I chose to focus on in this book that I'm working on, and I hope, and by the way, out, if you're listening out there and you would be interested in reading this, send us a quick email and say, yeah, I think you're onto something, or no, that doesn't. I'd like some feedback, but I think it has some potential. I'm hoping to contact Jocko Willink. He has a publishing house now,
Mm.
and has a large following. So, I mean, if he were to even mention it once on his podcast, it'd probably be, 50,000 in sales right there. But I don't know that it's, I don't have a publisher yet. So what I'm calling it is a title. This is just a working title. This isn't, this is copyrighted because I wrote it in default copyrights apply. Uh, Something like The Master, a Navy SEAL learns ancient wisdom from Jiu-Jitsu master Hixon Gracie. Um, that's that is, hopefully captures exactly what I'm trying to do. So a title hopefully nails pretty much the theme of the book. So what I divided it into, I'm just flipping through it right now, so I can't even remember it all. I was like getting up on a couple hundred pages. Uh, so what I do is I have lessons. I have so far I have 14 lessons. I may add a couple more, and the lessons are the chapters. So chapter 1, lesson 1 is compassion. Um, Lesson 2 is inspiration, courage, humility, patience, flexibility, intensity, leverage, artistry, endurance, nature, strategy, moderation, and water, even a chapter on water, because he was quoted in one of his fights or one of his documentaries. They said, well, this guy is like 250 pounds and you're 185. How are you going to contend with him? And he goes, I'm not worried about it. He goes, he going to play rock and I'm going to play water. Like he is like that. That's what it's like fighting with him. He's like, it's like you have glue all over you. You can't get away from him. He's slippery, but he's also very powerful. And it's like, you feel like you're fighting yourself when you spar with him. It's really weird. I have never, and everybody says this, like a top level guys that I've talked to, including some of his brothers who are world-class black belts themselves. So, but what the lessons go into what I've learned from him, and that's what I want to pass on. So I'm looking at it as kind of a book of sort of a philosophy of wisdom. I mean, well, philosophy itself, like, people get freaked out by philosophy, and a lot of philosophy proper, like at the university level, and I've taken a lot of courses in philosophy in my doctoral program. It can get pretty out there and unpractical and just, gazing at one's navel for whatever reason. But really, philosophy, I'd like to take the snobbiness out of that word, because it really just means love of wisdom, philosophia, love of wisdom, love of living the good life. And I think, and there are good books about this that I've learned a lot from, but just trying, like, how do we live a better life? So we're more happy, we're more content, we're more balanced, we're, proportional to life. And so that's what I want the book to do, to be a philosophy of practicality. But these lessons expand to, you don't have to be a jiu-jitsu fighter to learn from these lessons. I mean, they can apply to daily life, the stresses of work, the stresses of a family, relational problems or not. So I thought I would highlight, like, for example, and now one other thing I do in the book I'm attempting to do is to bring in ancient Greek concepts as parallels to Hixon, because, as they say, there's nothing new under the sun. And one character, for example, that's always been fascinating to me is a hero named Theseus. Theseus, the most famous hero in Greek mythology, is named Heracles. The Romans called him Hercules, but he was Heracles in Greek, and he was the greatest of all heroes, right? He did his labors, he killed all these monsters, really tough dude. But Theseus is equally engaging, if not more so, maybe. His so the mythology around Theseus is that he invented wrestling. Like Greek wrestling, Greco-Roman wrestling was a sport in the Olympic Games, and it was no holds barred. It was like about as close as you could get to modern MMA. Like they fought to the death or submission. Now, I mean, MMA doesn't fight to the death, hopefully, but to submission, and there were pretty much no rules. It was like two badasses get in and go for it and fight each other. And so Theseus is this legend that this legendary hero who came up with wrestling, and he did it in beating this crazy monster that lived near Eleusis outside of Athens. who would throw people off cliffs. This he was a terrible guy who would just rob people and throw them off a cliff to their death. And he came and out wrestled this dude and slammed him on his back and destroyed him. Um, he's also known as the one who defeated the man-eating minotaur, half bull, half man monster who lived in, well, was locked up in the labyrinth on the island of Crete. And the labyrinth was this maze that was built by Daedalus, who was the greatest artist slash architect of all time, who made this maze that no one could escape from. Well, he went there, he traveled to Crete, and so Theseus was a king of Athens. So a lot of times the heroes were also kings. This comes through in Homer all the time. Like in the Iliad, you have Menelaus is a king, he's also a hero. Hector is a king, also a hero. So he was the king of Athens, and he went to fight this Minotaur. And there's like in all Greek mythology, I teach this at the university, and one of the hardest things for my students to get a grip on is how many different accounts there are, because layers accrue over time. I mean, Ovid tells it one way, Homer tells it another way, Virgil gives his spin on it, and so you have all these layers of myth. And 9 times out, all the time, my students will say, well, oh, Professor, I read this, but I always heard this. I'm like, yeah, because they're both out there. There's lots of different ways to tell this, and it depends on who you read or heard it from. So anyway, Theseus goes to Crete. He travels from Athens to Crete and fights the Minotaur. He goes into the maze, finds him, and with a little help from some friends, finds his way out of the thing. But destroys it. And one account is that he beats it with his bare hands, that he like strangles it. And now, so that's intriguing to me, because now jumping back to Hixon, I was like, if anybody could kill a half bull, half man by strangling the thing, it would be Hixon. Because I've seen him fight some people who are about as strong as a bull and destroy him. But he does it with leverage, with finesse, with the real skill of just being not only an expert in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but a phenom like that, like a real artist. So I play with concepts like that, like Theseus, and there's one account, and this would totally apply to Hixon, like where I talk about this in the draft as well. There are 2 fighters, they're Olympic wrestlers. And I'll just boil it down for time's sake. So submission is the way they're fighting for submission. Well, one fighter gets the other fighter in, it sounds like a choke, a strangle or a choke. And so he chokes him, and he's choking him to death, actually. And the other dude will not submit, and gets the other guy that's choking him in this crazy ankle lock, and he's breaking his ankle. He's breaking his ankle as this other dude's choking him. And as it goes, there was so much excruciating pain in the dude's ankle, he taps, he submits. But right at the moment, the other guy expires because he'd taken so much of his air away, he dies. So he actually won the fight, but died as a result, because he wasn't submit either, but he was inflicting so much pain on the other dude. So that's intriguing, to like, you won the fight, but you died and your opponent lived. So who really won here? I mean, that's kind of a funny thing to think about, but this is an ancient account, and I cite it. But back to Hixon, like I'll never forget in the second Vale Tudo, I believe. Vale Tudo is a fight in Japan. It's a no holds barred fight. He was fighting in his second bout, defending his reigning championship. It's a brutal night, because you have to, it's single elimination, and you have to fight like 3 times in a row to get to the championship fight. I mean, you get a little bit of rest while the other 2 fight, but it's single elimination to get 2 fighters, and they fight. Like MMA is just 1 fight per night. not to say that's easy, but this is like 3 fights in a row to get to the championship. So in one documentary, if y'all out there want to watch this, it's on YouTube. It's called Choke, just CHOKE, Choke. And it's, yeah, it's readily available on YouTube. His wife Kim, who I know, I mean, I know his family, I know all his kids. Um, they were asking her like, what are your worries? Are you scared? I mean, he's going into this fight with some beasts, they're trying to crush him. And she said, I'm in a bad space because I know him, and he will never give up. It will either be he goes unconscious or he dies, but he will never give up. And I know Hixon. I know that's the truth. He's never submitted. He's never been submitted. I mean, other than when he was a teenager growing up. But once he got into the professional leagues, nobody's ever beaten him. And so I thought that's an interesting account from ancient Greece of this hardcore fighting that, I mean, I'm a very curious, like my imagination's always running. I'm thinking, man, I wonder how close that a lot of their techniques were to modern Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, it's not rocket science, it's basic leverage. And the Greeks were very smart. I mean, they came up with all kinds of uses of leverage, Archimedes to Euclid to all of these classical mathematical geniuses. So I'm going through all of these different lessons that I've learned from him. The lesson with Theseus would be courage. um but there's all and I'm weaving in not only legendary mythological figures like Theseus, but also real historical people like Socrates, Diogenes, philosophers who had something to offer. So yeah.
You clearly hold Hixon in great esteem, as do others, as you mentioned. Is he how do I word this? Does he present the lessons, obviously not with, or maybe not, I shouldn't assume, with the historical, the tie-in, right, to mythology or anything else, but is it his personality, you know, is is it when you were, working, learning from him, did he present these lessons like this? Or is it just through observation you've made these connections, um, and and you draw those lessons from what you observe from him? Does he, what he was instructing you, teaching you,
Yeah.
mentoring you, right?
Right.
Um, was he I guess what I'm trying to get at is there are a lot of athletes,
Hmm.
warriors, whatever you wanna call them, who are good at their job, and yet, like, we don't necessarily turn to them for these type of lessons that you're describing. Like, they're not like, being a good athlete isn't in and of itself, worthy of necessarily holding someone in high esteem, right?
Right.
Like, you seem to be drawing much you drew much deeper lessons from your time, working with him. So his what do you think it is about him that 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 made that possible versus just anyone else who's good at, insert sport or combat or whatever there?
Yeah. I really analyze a lot um of what's going on. I try to step back a lot, and I think just as part of my just overall curiosity to think just beyond, okay, the lesson is here's how to execute a choke or an arm lock.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, A plus B equals C.
Mhm.
But spending time with him and watching him in a variety of contexts began uh, to open my eyes to that there was something really really special going on with this guy. Like he isn't just another whatever. As an instructor, he's a great teacher. He's a great instructor. I mean, brilliant, and as that goes. But I think what struck me is looking beyond just his teaching techniques to what makes him tick. Like, what are the kinds of things that make him tick? I'll give you one example. It was think it was 1994. I'm pretty sure, yeah. I was out of the military. I had opened up my own jujitsu school in Cincinnati, Ohio, I was residing in Northern Kentucky at that time back then. And I was an undergrad student and I needed some extra bucks and nobody knew this stuff. So I was teaching it left and right. I had like 35, 40 students at the apex of my school. And so Hixon was teaching in Chicago. He was doing a seminar up there. And he invited me up to come to help because it's not that far. And I was always trying to connect with him to do further training. So I brought one of my best students with me and went up to Chicago to the seminar. And there were 85 or 86 guys. I think there was 86, including myself, at the seminar. And these are the early days. But I mean, Hixon, okay, so there was a couple day seminar, and Hixon is just um he's a rock star already. Like all these guys were semi-pro, if not professional fighters, and they're learning from him. And he's just going around. He schooled 86 guys one afternoon, one after another, no breaks. Boom. And I mean, these guys are coming at him full bore. I was just like, I cannot believe this. Like, and it took him like an hour to get through all these 80 guys, but just one right after another, he taps them all. And I'm just like, geez. And in fact, this is a sub story here. He gets to me. I'm just sitting on the wall, and I'm the only guy wearing a ranked belt in the whole place. All these guys don't know anything. And it gets to me, and we're going around, and it's like, okay, next, come on, next, come on. And it gets to me, and I'm like, dude, I'm good. You go ahead. I just gave the next guy. He's like, I don't need to go out. I know what he knows. I know how fast he can destroy me. It's like I've trained with him for hours and hours and hours. And so I tapped the next guy to go ahead. So it skipped me. I didn't go out and spar with him. So later that night at the hotel, we were staying in the same hotel. We were going out for this great Italian meal. And I mean, Hixon, he observes everything. He doesn't miss anything. And he said, Steve, why didn't you come out and spar with me today? He saw that I just kind of, I didn't even know if he noticed, but he saw me like wave my chance to go spar with him. And I was like, I said something, looking back on it, it's really naive and stupid. I said, well, you had your hands full. You had 85 guys out there. I don't want to go out and take any more calories away from you. I know what you can do to me. And he just, he looked at me and he said, oh, I'm going to sleep better tonight. You would be a nightmare for me to have to spar with you on top of all those other guys. We all started laughing, me and my buddy. But the profundity of why he was asking me that. I mean, he didn't give me shit. He's lighting stuff up because I'm like, that is pretty funny. Because I mean, he could kill me just as fast as he could kill anybody. But what I realized, and I talk about this in the draft of the book, he was trying to tell me something profound, and I didn't get it at the time. Now, years later, I get it. He was trying to say, now you could pretty much hang with any single one of those guys out there at my level at the time. Not 86 in a row, mind you, but I could pick out any one of them, and you could handle them. So how much better for them to see me deal with you, a ranked guy way above them, and the lesson would have been really good. It's like, oh, you think you're doing, look here, I've been training this guy for 3 years, and he can destroy me just as easily as he destroys everybody else. And they should have seen that. They should have seen him demonstrate that. And now for all these years later, I'm like, damn, I should have gone out there, because then they would have seen some real skill exchanges. Like most of these guys are just going brute force trying to get him, but he was, yeah, I mean, they would have seen some real interplay of skill that they weren't seeing at that level.
Do you do you see something in excuse me, do you pick up anything in him not, I don't know what the right word is, not calling you out, but, like, calling you up anyways? Like, "No, no, 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 no. I want Steve. I want Steve.
Yeah.
Steve, it's your turn. It's your turn." Do you pick up
No,
anything in that, or was it just like there's a lot going on? There's, there people are coming back and forth.
yeah.
You think there's anything in there also?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's just him being playful,
Mm,
honestly.
mm,
I really do. Um, but he doesn't let anything go and he doesn't miss anything. And so it was a jab. It was a bit of a jab, but in a good humored way. And we all laughed our asses off when he said that. But I think he was trying to teach me. He was always trying to teach me something.
mm,
Now, here's where at that same seminar, all right, I think this was the second day. I can't remember. It was either the first or the second day. I think it was a 2-day seminar. All right, this melts my heart. I mean, this has made me get choked up more than once thinking about this. We were on a lunch break. So we had about 45-minute lunch break or something like that. Everybody just brought whatever. Hixon had been training like constantly. I mean, he's just all out. He's sweating. He's switching out t-shirts, and it's his lunch break. And I'm just there to help him facilitate stuff. I know all the moves, so he uses me as like to demonstrate a lot of the moves. And there's a guy like, and I'd noticed him, I think at some point, but he's kind of lurking in the shadows. He's not part. He's at the seminar. He might have even paid for the seminar, but I don't. He wasn't participating up to that point. And the guy, he was born. He had no arms. He was
mm,
born deformed with no arms. I mean, not even a stump. Just no arms. And he wasn't the most attractive guy in the world, and he was just kind of keeping in the shadows, and he was self-conscious, and here are all these tough guys. And I mean, so here I am, I'm sitting kind of next to Hixon. He's basically talking to guys and signing autographs, and people were asking him questions. And I mean, there's a line of people. He's a rock star, right? And he turns to me and says, Steve, hey, I'm gonna leave for a few minutes. I need a little break here. He goes, just answer these guys' questions because you know all the answers that I know to give them. For they're asking them on a basic level, so answer their questions if they have them, and I'll be back to just hold the fort for me for a second. And he just kind of slinked around and went over to the guy with no arms. And he said, "Hey, my friend," and got talking with him, and was like, how's it going, and how are you taking the seminar? He started talking to the guy. I could see it. He commenced to give like an hour-long private lesson to this guy about how he could use his legs, how if he was on his back he could rock and use his legs to get around somebody. Even showed him the triangle, which is a leg choke. um he spent his whole lunch break helping this guy
mm,
who was, I could tell, embarrassed, self-conscious, who wouldn't be, what are you going to do? You got no arms. And he intensely, I mean, he gave it hour-long private lesson and just the basics of what if anything you could do. And he didn't make a big deal about it. People were kind of watching, wow, whoa. But I'm like, that's Hickson. he he has a deep drive against bullies
mm,
and against, he cannot stand for people in positions of strength or brute power to take advantage of people in positions of relative weakness. He hates it. It makes it. I know deep down that's what gets him fired up. But just so that lesson is on compassion, like
mhm,
just man, seeing another human being and treating them with ultimate dignity. Here's all these guys that are, oh, hey, look at me. And no, he doesn't gravitate to any of that. He gravitates to the guy who's at a really serious disadvantage.
mhm,
So observing those things about him through the years has made me go, there's some depth here
Mhm.
that man, I don't see very often. It's not an everyday occurrence. Um, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like an X factor. There's something special there. I mean, it it almost sounds like it almost sounds like in television or the movies, which is,
Yeah.
oh, I always gotta draw parallels there because I just, grew
Yeah.
up in front of a TV. So it's like, but it's almost like that sort of classic, like sensei type,
Yeah.
like wise
Right.
master master. I
Master.
think I
Yeah.
think that's gotta be a part of the book title, but it's like it's almost like you found a
Yeah.
real life master,
Yeah.
basically.
I thought about titling the book Learning from Yoda.
Yeah,
Like
like a
yeah,
Yoda-like
a
figure. I mean,
Yoda
that
Yoda like figure.
yeah.
But and I in the introduction that I'm working on still, you usually you write the introduction last. Um, I'm trying to say I don't want the book to be hagiographic. I'm not putting him on some perfect pedestal to say he doesn't have any flaws or anything like that,
Uh-huh.
but just that he is a truly incredible
Mhm.
person, and you're not likely to meet very many people in your lifetime like Hixon. And I just count it the ultimate privilege to not just to study with him and call him my master, but a friend who
Mhm.
will stay at his house. We'll go have meals together. I mean, that is unbelievable. And I think those interactions what have led me to some of the lessons I really want to get into. I mean, I could talk about jujitsu all day, but that's not really the point. It's the point of the bigger things I've learned from him, um, in all of his in all of his teaching. But his teaching, I'll give you one last like episode. This is how smart the guy is, right? Um, so I was teaching in assaults division during when I was working with him, and he had bought a Sig P226. It's a 9 millimeter, just for home security or home defense or whatever. And he asked me if I had any recommendations for it. And those things are good to go out of the box. But he was asking me for marksmanship principles, and so it turned out that we were using P226s at the time, SIGs. That was our issue, backup sidearm. And I said, well, one thing I would tell you, because if out of the box, well, now they've got all kinds of fancy sight systems on them, but back in the day, you buy SIG P226 and you have two rear white dots and one front white dot, right? And what I had learned, and after going to sniper school and thinking long, hard hours about marksmanship, like how, and I was, I'm not bragging, I wasn't the best, but I was pretty good. I could hit a target. Um, I learned that the thing that makes most accurate uh, firing for a firearm is when you focus on that front sight. When the front sight is crystal clear and the back two are kind of blurry and the target's kind of blurry, but that front sight is where the bullet's going. And so if you're lined up properly and you have that dialed in, you're going to drill nails, because that's those guns will shoot always better than you can shoot as a flawed person. That bullet's going in the same place every time, but just how you have it lined up. So I said, what I suggest to some of my guys on the firing range, it's their option to do it or not do it, is take like a magic marker, like a Sharpie or something, and black out those two rear sights, the white
Mm,
dots.
mhm, mhm.
Black them out, because all you got to do is line up, the rear with the, I don't know how to do this backwards, but like
Right.
line, as long as it's lined up even,
Yeah. The top of the iron
the
sights.
top of the iron
Yeah.
sight with the rear, you're lined up, and that white one will stand out and your eye will be drawn to it because it's prominent, it's white. When you have rear white and front white, your eye kind of goes back and forth. It doesn't know
Mhm,
what to focus on.
mhm,
It's a weird thing, and I can't even really explain it, but I've seen it happen. And I had way better results when guys would black out those rear sights.
mhm.
He looks at me and goes, oh, I thought about that. I thought about that. He had already now I'd been thinking about this and teaching SEALs to shoot. And so, so I saw him. So he learned, but he had already been analyzing that very thing that took me a while to think about.
Mm.
Um, and I'm not saying I'm the first to think about it, but I hadn't heard anybody else tell me about that, and I had thought about it a lot. So anyway, so one time we were training, he loves joking around. So he said, "Well, Steve, you may be able to beat me on the mats, but I'll beat you at the shooting range any day." So just kind of his sense of
He's
just being
always good with a quip, a one liner.
yeah, yeah, just a good dude.
Um, okay, well, thank you for sharing those stories. I'm looking forward to seeing this book uh, come out. For those who are interested, we'll send out notes as it moves along the process. But we're out of time here, so we will catch you in the next one.